Working the night shift in IT isn't what most people would call thrilling. It's mostly quiet, routine checks on systems, and monitoring the security feeds for an empty office building. I've been doing it for over a year now, and I've gotten used to the silence. Honestly, it can get pretty boring, just me, a dozen screens, and the hum of the server room. That night started out just like any other. I grabbed my usual cup of coffee, settled into my chair, and started my rounds of system checks. Everything was smooth, nothing out of the ordinary. The cameras showed the usual, a completely empty building. Sometimes I'd see the janitor doing his rounds, but other than that, nothing. Around 2 a.m., I noticed a flicker on one of the security feeds. At first, I didn't think much of it. The system can be glitchy sometimes, and a quick reset usually fixes it. But then it happened again, this time on a different camera. Another quick flicker, like static across the screen. I leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. Something was off. The flickering spread to other cameras one by one, until almost every feed had a brief flash of static. It wasn't normal, but I figured it was just a temporary issue. I pulled up the diagnostics, running a check to see if the system had encountered any errors. No alerts, no red flags. Weird. Then, as I was staring at the screen, I noticed something that made my heart skip. On one of the cameras I saw a figure, just for a second, but it was there. Someone walking down the hallway on the 4th floor. Now, this building is supposed to be empty. I'm the only one here, and the janitor had already finished his rounds hours ago. I clicked on the feed, zooming in, but the figure had disappeared. The hallway was empty again. What the hell? I rewound the footage, playing it back frame by frame. And that's when I saw it. The figure looked like me. Same hair, same clothes. It was blurry, but the resemblance was uncanny. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. It's just a glitch, I told myself. The camera must have caught some kind of reflection or weird distortion. I went to the next camera in the sequence to see if it had picked up anything else, but as I clicked, the screen went black. My stomach tightened. I checked the other feeds, and one by one they all started to go down. All except one, the hallway leading to my office. The camera showed a figure again, walking slowly, step by step, getting closer to where I was sitting, and it was me. My throat went dry as I watched. The figure on the screen was walking down the exact hallway outside my office door, but when I looked at the live feed, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, but the camera showed her, or me, getting closer. I tried to breathe, but panic was creeping in fast. This isn't real. This can't be real. I looked over my shoulder at the door, half expecting to see the handle turn, but everything was still, quiet. Then I looked back at the screen. I was standing right outside the door. The camera showed her hand reaching for the handle, but the actual door stayed motionless. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to do. Should I open the door? Should I run? Where could I even go? The figure on the screen turned her head, like she was looking directly into the camera, directly at me. I backed up, my legs hitting the edge of the desk. My hands were shaking and I couldn't pull my eyes away from the screen. What was happening? Was I losing it? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think straight. Then the figure on the camera smiled. A slow, eerie smile that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my phone, yanked open the office door, and ran into the hallway. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness, and I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see her, me, following. But the hallway was empty. I rushed down the stairs, my heart racing, my mind struggling to make sense of what I'd just seen. I had to get out of the building. I couldn't stay there. I sprinted through the lobby and slammed the door open, bursting out into the cold night air. I stood there panting, my breath fogging in front of me. The building loomed behind me, dark and silent as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. I wasn't crazy. I couldn't have imagined that. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling as I dialed my boss. The phone rang once, twice, and then went to voicemail. Great. I tried to calm myself down, but every time I closed my eyes I saw her, me, smiling through the camera, standing outside my door like she belonged there. I wasn't going back in. No way. The next morning I came back with my supervisor and told him everything. I showed him the footage, but of course it was gone. All of it. The glitches, the figure, everything. Like it had never happened. He gave me this weird look like I was making it all up, and I didn't blame him. I sounded crazy, but I knew what I saw. I couldn't explain it, but I wasn't going to forget it. I quit the night shift after that. Found a different job. One where I didn't have to sit alone in a dark office building with only security cameras for company. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about it. I wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door. If I, had stepped inside. And the worst part, I don't know if she's still in there, somewhere waiting. Working late wasn't exactly my favorite thing to do, but the receptionist job paid well enough and I needed the extra hours. I was sitting at the front desk wrapping up for the night when the phone rang. It was almost 10 p.m., and everyone else had already left. I remember glancing at the clock thinking, who's calling this late? I picked up the receiver, and a guy on the other end introduced himself as Tony from maintenance. He had a casual tone, said something about needing to send someone over to check on a broken door in the back, and asked if I could stay behind to let the repairman in. It sounded legit. I'd gotten calls like this before, and the building was old, so things broke down all the time. Sure, I said, not really thinking much of it. He thanked me, said the guy would be there in about 10 minutes, and hung up. I went back to scrolling through my phone, waiting. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, a guy walked in wearing a jumpsuit, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and carrying a toolbox. He gave me a quick nod and mumbled, "Here for the door." I smiled politely, even though something about him felt off. Maybe it was how he avoided eye contact or how his hands fidgeted with the toolbox handle, like he was nervous. But I brushed it off. People are weird sometimes, right? I led him toward the back, where the supposed broken door was. He didn't say much as we walked, just the occasional grunt or nod when I pointed things out. The hallway lights flickered, casting these weird shadows on the walls, and I felt this creeping unease settling in. I told myself I was just being paranoid. It was late, and the building always felt a little creepy after hours. When we got to the door, I pointed at it. "This one, right?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the door for a few seconds before muttering, "Yeah." Then he set his toolbox down and started fumbling with the doorknob. I stood there, waiting, but after a few minutes, he still hadn't done anything. He wasn't even really looking at the door, just sort of hovering. "You okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He turned and gave me this weird smile, like he was trying to be friendly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, just gonna need a bit longer." Something in my gut twisted. I'd been in enough sketchy situations to know when something wasn't right. I took a step back, glancing at the door. "Do you need me to call someone? Maybe Tony? Make sure we're fixing the right thing?" The guy's smile faded. "No need for that. I've got it." He said it with such finality that it made my skin crawl. I started to back up, my hand reaching for my phone in my pocket. "Well, I've got to head back up front," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just, let me know when you're done." As I turned to leave, I noticed something. He wasn't working on the door at all. He was fiddling with the lock, but not in a way that made sense. It looked like he was jamming it, like he was deliberately trying to make it so the door wouldn't open. My stomach dropped. I walked faster, not wanting to let on that I was freaked out. When I got back to the front desk, I dialed the number for maintenance, hoping to get a hold of Tony and confirm what the hell was going on. But when the line picked up, it wasn't Tony on the other end. It was a voicemail. "We're sorry, the maintenance office is closed. Please call back during regular business hours." My heart started racing. If the maintenance office was closed, who the hell had I been talking to earlier? That's when I heard footsteps coming up the hall behind me. Slow, deliberate. The guy was heading my way, I hung up the phone and grabbed my keys, fumbling to unlock the front door. But when I turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. The door was locked from the inside. What the hell? I tried again, harder this time, but the door was jammed. I spun around, my pulse thundering in my ears just as the repairman stepped into the lobby. His eyes were darker now, the friendly facade gone. He set his toolbox down, slowly, like he had all the time in the world. "You going somewhere?" he asked, his voice low, almost mocking. Fear hit me hard and I backed away, my eyes darting around the room for another way out. The back exits were down the hall, but if he'd sabotaged the front, there was no telling what he'd done back there. I swallowed hard, trying to think. "What do you want?" My voice shook, but I didn't care. I just needed to buy time. He smiled that creepy smile again. "Just to chat. Maybe a bit more, depends on how you behave." My mind was racing. This guy wasn't here to fix anything. He'd come here to trap me. I could feel the panic rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. There had to be another way out. Then I remembered. The side door in the stairwell. I hadn't used it in months, but it might still work. I glanced toward the hallway, weighing my chances. He was blocking the main door, but if I made a break for it, I might be able to outrun him. Without another word, I bolted. I heard him shout behind me, followed by the sound of his boots pounding against the tile as he gave chase. I sprinted down the hallway, my legs burning as I pushed myself faster than I thought possible. The stairwell door was just ahead. I slammed into it, throwing it open and rushing down the stairs. The side door was at the bottom, but when I reached it, I realized with horror that he'd jammed that one too. The lock was busted just like the front door. I spun around, breathing hard. He was coming down the stairs slowly now, like he knew I had nowhere to go. His smile was gone, replaced by something darker, more dangerous. Trapped, my mind raced for a solution. And then, an idea hit me. The fire alarm. Without hesitating, I reached up and pulled it, the loud, shrill ring echoing through the stairwell. The sprinklers overhead sputtered to life, spraying water everywhere. His smug expression faltered for just a second, and that was all I needed. While he was distracted, I shoved past him, running back up the stairs and into the lobby. The fire alarm had automatically unlocked the doors, standard building protocol. I didn't look back as I shoved the front door open and ran out into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, hands trembling as I fumbled for my keys. I got in, slammed the door, and locked it. My breath was ragged, my body soaked from the sprinklers, but I didn't care. I was alive. I called the police and they came fast, but when they searched the building, the guy was gone. No trace of him, no toolbox, nothing, but I know what I saw and I know he'll be back for someone else. Working the night shift at a distribution warehouse wasn't exactly what I'd call a dream job, but it paid the bills. It was mindless, mostly. Just me, a few machines, and rows upon rows of shelves. It was the kind of place that stretched out forever in the dark, with the hum of forklifts and conveyor belts creating a steady background noise that became almost soothing after a while. I'd been working there for about 6 months, and nothing out of the ordinary had ever happened. That is, until a few nights ago. It started like any other shift. I clocked in around 11 p.m., grabbed my scanner, and started my rounds. The warehouse was massive, with shelves that towered above you, filled with pallets of everything from electronics to canned goods. The lighting was dim, just enough to get by, but it always left the far ends of the aisles in shadows. The place was creepy at night, sure, but I'd gotten used to it. Around 2 a.m., though, I heard it, a noise from the far end of the building. At first, I shrugged it off. This was an old warehouse, after all, and strange noises weren't uncommon. The place had rats, the machines would groan, and sometimes the wind would rattle the loading docks. I figured it was just one of those things. But as the shift dragged on, the noises didn't stop. They got louder. Every so often, I'd hear what sounded like metal clanging or something being knocked over. It was coming from one of the back aisles where the lights barely reached. I told myself it was probably a pallet shifting or something minor, but deep down, it started to bother me. After hearing it for the fifth or sixth time, I grabbed my flashlight and decided to check it out. Big mistake. I walked toward the back of the warehouse, shining my light down the aisles as I passed them. Everything looked normal, just boxes stacked high like always. But when I got to the last row where the noise had come from, I noticed something off. One of the shelves, one of the big metal ones, had a dent in it, like something heavy had slammed into it. My first thought was a forklift had hit it, but there hadn't been any other workers on shift with me. I was completely alone. The noise came again, closer this time. It was a scraping sound, like metal dragging on concrete. My flashlight beam flickered as I swung it around, trying to pinpoint the source. That's when I saw it. A shadow, darting between the shelves. I froze. For a second I thought I was just seeing things. It was late, and my brain was probably playing tricks on me. But then I saw it again. A dark shape moving quickly like it was running from aisle to aisle. My heart started pounding. I told myself it had to be one of the rats, or maybe even a stray dog that had gotten inside. But as I stood there, the noise came again, louder this time, and I could swear I heard something breathing. I decided to head back to the main part of the warehouse, where the light was better, and maybe call someone to come check it out. But as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming toward me. Panic hit me. I started walking faster, trying not to break into a run, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Every time I passed an aisle, I'd catch a glimpse of movement, just out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't a rat, and it wasn't a dog. Whatever it was big. I reached the main floor, where the lights were brighter, and stopped to catch my breath. For a few minutes, everything was quiet again. Maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Then, the lights went out. Every single one of them. The hum of the machine stopped, and the entire warehouse was plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered once, then twice, and then went dead. I was alone in the pitch black, in the middle of a warehouse the size of a football field, with no idea where the breaker was. And somewhere out there I could still hear those footsteps. I backed up against one of the shelves, trying to calm down, but it was no use. The fear hit me hard. I couldn't see a thing, and the footsteps were getting closer. I didn't know what was out there, but it was coming for me. My phone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight app. The weak light barely penetrated the darkness, but it was better than nothing. I started making my way toward the office where the breaker room was. If I could just get the power back on, maybe I'd be able to see what the hell was going on. But as I moved, the footsteps followed. I shone my phone's light around, trying to see something, anything. But all I saw were the endless rows of shelves, towering over me like silent giants. The footsteps were so close now that I could hear the shuffle of shoes on the concrete floor. Whatever was following me wasn't far behind. I picked up the pace, practically running at this point, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was almost to the office when I heard it, a low, raspy whisper right behind me. "Where are you going?" I spun around, my phone light flickering, and for a split second I saw it. A figure, tall, hunched with long, gangly limbs. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could see its eyes, wide, staring right at me. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted into the office, slamming the door behind me, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone. I stood there, in the dark, listening to the sound of footsteps right outside the door. For what felt like hours, I waited. The footsteps eventually faded, but I wasn't about to go back out there. I stayed locked in the office until my shift ended, my back pressed against the door, every muscle tense. When the morning crew came in, they found me still sitting there, my eyes wide, phone clutched in my hand. I told them what happened, but they just laughed it off, saying I was probably just tired or imagining things. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget that voice. I've worked as a janitor in a corporate office building for about 5 years now. And most nights it's a routine job. Empty offices, flickering fluorescent lights, and the hum of vending machines in break rooms. It's not glamorous, but it's quiet, and quiet is what I like. One night, though, things didn't go quite as planned. It was the end of my shift, around 11 p.m., and I was finishing up in the lobby. The place was empty, as always. I was sweeping up by the front doors, getting ready to leave, when I heard a faint beep from the security panel. That was my cue. The automatic security system was about to activate. Normally, I'm out the door before it kicks in, but I guess I lost track of time that night. I glanced at the clock and cursed under my breath, just 5 minutes too late. I made a mad dash for the exit, but the doors had already locked with a loud metallic click. The lights dimmed, leaving the building bathed in shadows. Great, I muttered. I wasn't too worried. This wasn't the first time I'd gotten stuck inside after hours. The security system could be a pain, but all I had to do was call my supervisor, and she'd unlock the doors remotely. No big deal. But when I pulled out my phone, I noticed something odd. No signal. Not a single bar. That was strange, considering I'd always had service in the building. I shrugged it off, figuring it was just a fluke, and walked over to the office phone at the front desk. When I picked it up, though, the line was dead. No dial tone. Nothing. Weird, I thought, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. There had to be another way to get out. I figured I'd head down to the basement and try the service entrance. The stairs leading down were at the back of the building, near the storage rooms, and I was pretty sure that door didn't lock with the rest of the building. I grabbed my flashlight from the janitor's closet just in case. The basement wasn't exactly well lit, even on a good night. As I started walking down the long hallway toward the stairs, the lights flickered. Not just once, but several times, plunging the corridor into brief bursts of darkness. I froze, listening. That's when I heard it. Heavy breathing. Slow, deliberate, and close. Too close. I whipped around, shining my flashlight down the hallway, but there was nothing there. Just shadows stretching out along the walls. My heart started pounding in my chest. I knew I was the only one in the building. I had checked every floor before heading to the lobby. So where was the breathing coming from? The lights flickered again, and I swear I heard footsteps. Not the soft shuffle of shoes, but heavy, deliberate steps echoing down the hall. I gripped the flashlight tighter, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of the security guys was messing with me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I hurried toward the basement stairs, my footsteps echoing louder than they should have in the quiet building. Every step felt like a lifetime, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. When I finally reached the stairwell, I felt a brief moment of relief. I pushed open the door and headed down the narrow staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was even darker than usual, the lights overhead flickering sporadically. I shone my flashlight around, scanning the concrete walls and storage rooms. Everything seemed normal. Boxes stacked high, old office furniture, cleaning supplies. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that didn't belong. There was a door I had never seen before, tucked away in the farthest corner of the basement. It was old, older than the rest of the building by the looks of it, made of thick, rusted metal, with a heavy lock bolted across the front. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. I'd worked here for 5 years and had never noticed that door. The building wasn't that big, and I knew the layout by heart, so how could I have missed it? Curiosity got the better of me. I approached the door slowly, my flashlight beam flickering across the rough surface. As I got closer, I noticed something else. Scratches. Deep, jagged scratches all over the metal, like someone, or something, had tried to claw their way out. A cold chill ran down my spine. I knelt down, running my fingers over the lock. It was old, rusted, and looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But something about the door felt wrong, like it was hiding something dangerous. I stood up, my hand shaking as I gripped the flashlight. I should have walked away, I knew that. I should have turned around and gone back upstairs, but I couldn't. There was something about that door that pulled me in, like it wanted to be opened. Just as I reached for the lock, I heard it again. Heavy breathing. This time, it was right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight sweeping across the basement, but there was no one there. The footsteps echoed louder, closer, as if they were circling me. Then the power cut out completely. I was plunged into total darkness. My flashlight flickered weakly, the beam barely cutting through the thick blackness. Panic set in, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out. I didn't care about the door or what was behind it anymore. I just wanted to leave. But as I turned to head back to the stairs, the door behind me creaked open. I froze. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was inside. But something compelled me to turn around, to shine my light on the now open door. The room beyond was pitch black, but I could feel something there. Something watching me. The air was thick with a damp, musty smell, like the inside of a tomb. And then I saw it. 2 glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I didn't wait to see what it was. I bolted, running faster than I ever thought possible, up the stairs, through the flickering hallway, and toward the lobby. I didn't stop until I reached the front doors. The moment I reached the lobby, the lights flickered back on. The power returned and the doors unlocked with a soft click. I didn't look back. I didn't care what had been in that basement, or why the door had opened on its own. I just ran. I never told anyone what I saw until now. I still have lingering PTSD whenever I'm in an office building alone late at night. I've worked in retail for a few years now, mostly night shifts. It's not my dream job, but it pays the bills. Closing up the store at the end of the day is usually routine. You shut off the lights, count the register, lock the doors, nothing to it. But that night was different. It was nearing 11 p.m., and I was getting ready to close up. The store was mostly quiet, just the hum of the air conditioning and the soft, generic music playing over the speakers. I was doing my final rounds through the aisles, making sure everything was in order. We hadn't had many customers that evening, just a handful of people coming in and out. But then, as I made my way to the back of the store, I saw him, a man lingering in the aisles. I hadn't noticed him before. He wasn't shopping, wasn't browsing. He was just standing there, staring at one of the shelves. He looked out of place, wearing a heavy coat even though it wasn't cold out. My stomach twisted a little, but I shook it off. I walked over, forcing a polite smile. "Excuse me, sir. We're closing in a few minutes." He didn't move, didn't even look at me, just kept staring at the shelf, like he hadn't heard a word I said. I cleared my throat, stepping a little closer. "Sir, we're about to close. You'll need to leave soon." Still nothing. I was starting to feel uneasy. Something about him didn't sit right. I was used to customers lingering a bit too long, but this guy? He was giving off a weird vibe. "Okay. I'll give you a few more minutes," I mumbled, backing away. I figured I'd finish up the rest of my closing duties and check back on him later. Maybe he'd get the hint and leave on his own. I headed to the front of the store, starting to shut off the lights. I glanced at the security monitor, keeping an eye on the guy. But when I looked back at the feed, he wasn't there anymore. The aisle was empty. I checked the other cameras, flicking through them one by one, but he was nowhere to be seen. My heart started to race. There was no way he could have left that quickly without me noticing. Where the hell did he go? I stood there staring at the monitor, trying to make sense of it. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw a notification from the store's security system. Front door opened. I glanced up at the front door. It was still closed. Locked. No one had come in or gone out. I checked the security feed again, but the front door camera showed nothing, just an empty entrance. The uneasy feeling was growing stronger by the second. Maybe he left through the back, I thought, but even that didn't make sense. The back door had a security alarm that would have gone off if anyone tried to open it, and it hadn't. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was late, I was tired, and maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe he'd slipped out while I wasn't paying attention, and the system was just glitching. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, like something scraping against the floor. It was coming from the bathroom. My pulse quickened as I walked toward the sound, every step feeling heavier than the last. The closer I got, the more my instincts screamed at me to turn around, to leave. But I couldn't. I had to check. I had to know. I pushed open the bathroom door, my heart pounding in my chest. The lights flickered as I stepped inside, casting eerie shadows on the tiled walls. The room was empty, or so I thought. Then I saw it. Written on the mirror, in what looked like red lipstick, were the words, "I'm still here." I felt the blood drain from my face. My first thought was that it was some kind of prank, but as I stood there staring at the message, a cold realization crept over me. This wasn't a joke. The man hadn't left. He was still in the store somewhere, watching me. I backed out of the bathroom, my eyes darting around the store. Every shadow, every corner seemed to hold something sinister. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. As I waited for the operator to pick up, I heard it again, that scraping sound. But this time, it was closer. Too close. I ran to the front of the store, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't care about closing up or locking the doors anymore. I just needed to get out. I needed to leave. The second I hit the pavement outside, the cool night air hit me, and I could finally breathe. I kept running until I was a few blocks away, only stopping when I felt like I was far enough from the store. When the police arrived, they searched the entire building, but they didn't find anyone. No sign of the man. No sign of anything suspicious, except for the message on the mirror. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe a disgruntled customer trying to scare me. But I knew better. I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd seen.